Good morning, Muskegon Valley Vineyard Church. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. What a privilege it is to be a father. You know, as a church, we've been talking about and exploring church and what church looks like and some of the functionings of the church. And today I want to share with you a few words about something that's really near and dear to my heart because it's a capacity that my wife and I have served for years and years. I don't know exactly how many, 10 plus for sure. And that is the role of eldership and what eldership means to the church and some of what the Bible talks about as sort of necessities to eldership. So I want to speak to you some about that today. Les and I've been serving, in that capacity. And I can tell you that functioning in it has been, short of being a husband and short of being a father, as we celebrate today, functioning as an elder has been a privilege, one of the singular most greatest privileges of anything that I've done. It has come with some of the greatest blessings that myself and Leslie have ever experienced. And I'll tell you, it has been some of the greatest challenge in our lives. But I can tell you without hesitation, it's been one of the greatest means of growth for us in our faith. So I'm excited to share a little bit about that today. One of the things that I want you to do today, and you've already looked through this passage in 1 Peter that we'll kind of use as a template for what I want to speak about, but it is Father's Day. And I think one of the roles of eldership is sort of a fathership, fatherhood, whatever the right word is, but spiritual fatherhood over the body of Christ is part of the role of an elder. And as fathers out there, I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about as an elder, I want you to put yourself, fathers, in the position of elder of your family and elder of your children. One of the words that Paul uses, as well as Peter use to describe eldership, is overseer. You oversee your families, you oversee the health and well-being of your children. So put yourself in the position of elder, even though you're not elder of the church, because I think a lot of what I share today will apply to you as fathers. There is a big difference, however, between being a father and being an elder in a church. And that is the fact that in many ways, eldership in the church is easier. One of the recommendations Paul makes, has to do with maturity and that elders not be new in their faith. I have had years and years and years with an instruction manual, and people who know what's in it teaching it to me. I'm talking about the Bible. And I've had years and years of praying and sort of walking in my faith. But I can remember as a father, I hadn't had years and years of experience. And I wished many times that my children had come out of the womb with a Bible being the first, not a Bible, with an instruction manual being the first thing that I saw when they emerged. And it would have been so nice to have been able to open that book up whenever I wanted to and find out what I needed to do to be a good and effective father. Having that would have been a really ginormous tool and a great help. But you don't. So as fathers, there is a lot of trial and error. Some of us have had great mentors as fathers. Others have not. And we've got to break the cycle of bad fathering when it comes to raising our kids. But in either case, whether it's eldership or fathering, it takes a commitment. And it takes stick-to-itiveness, and it takes the desire to put it first in your life. We can't be lazy, dads. We got to engage. We cannot coast as fathers. It doesn't work any more than I can coast as an elder. So take that to heart as we talk a little bit about eldership. In Titus chapter 1, 5 through 9, and in 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 7, you see Paul instructing Titus and Timothy about who Paul would recommend that these guys appoint as elders or overseers in their church. And I think it's interesting, Paul calls himself the spiritual father of Timothy and Titus. And so he's saying to his sons, in these churches that we've built and that we've planted through the missionary journeys of Paul and those men traveling with him, there has to be some structure. There has to be people, quote unquote, in charge. And these men, at that time especially, need to be men of good character. They need to be men who have good reputations in their communities, men who are not new to their faith, men not subject to drunkenness, it says, or greed. So anyway, I look at those and I say these aren't like supernatural characteristics, but it basically speaks to these being mature men, men who have had some experience in life, who have good dealings with those both inside and outside of the church, men who know the Lord, men who know His Word, and men who pray. And so, we won't talk much more about that because I want to talk about really more the function of elders in the church, which is what Peter talks about in 1 Peter. So you've already discussed this passage, and there's a few things that I want to draw out from it. I'm not going to necessarily read through it. You've read through it. And as always, I trust that what God's revealed to you is probably far more important and far more applicable to your lives than what I'm going to tell you. But maybe I can bring to mind a few things that you didn't think about or that didn't come up in conversation. In 1 Peter 5, verse 2, Peter, who considers himself to be an elder, instructs elders to do several things. First and foremost, to be shepherds of the flock. The concept of shepherd would have been an easily understood concept back in those days. It isn't necessarily something that is as applicable to our day-to-day lives as it would have been back then. Basically, a shepherd protects the flock. Peter warns us in verse 9 that there's an enemy prowling around waiting to devour. An elder's role as shepherd has always been one of protection. Sometimes we need protecting from others and from outside influences. We certainly need protecting from the schemes of the enemy because the devil loves to disrupt things and, be that prowling lion looking for someone to devour. But also, sometimes we need protecting from ourselves. And so I think one of the primary things to remember when you look at elders and the function of eldership in the church is that the goal of eldership is to love the people in the flock. Secondly, Peter instructs elders to be an example, to lead by example, and to serve willingly, he says, with an eagerness to serve. Trust me, it does not take long in serving as an overseer to learn humility and to be humbled. If the desire to shepherd the flock was done for the purpose of power, or as Peter warns against doing, to lord authority over people, it wouldn't take long for that to become obvious. And it wouldn't take long for that to break down the leadership of the church. And so it's very important to understand that humility, humbleness, a desire to serve is important at the leadership level of the church. In verse 3, Peter advises elders to be examples to people, and in verse 4 reminds us of the example which he follows and which we are all to follow, and that is Jesus himself, the perfect shepherd, whose example was one of continual service, continual sacrifice, and ultimate selflessness. Never did we see Jesus function for self. I am not saying that elders, church leadership, any of us have perfected loving this way. But as we are to use Jesus as an example for how we should live our lives, I would hope that the eldership of the church would be people that you could look to as examples of how to lead in humility, without pride, knowing that at some point we all started in the same place, and knowing that as elders, we are yet to be perfected. We are flawed. We are not perfect. We don't love perfectly. We're unable to. But we are people after God's heart. And I can say with 100% certainty, the eldership of this church seeks first the kingdom of God. From your pastor and Susan, to Jake and Beth, to May and Cam, Ron and Candace, and I would like to say my wife and I, there has been, especially in this season, a lot of seeking God's kingdom first for leadership in this church. And especially, in the season when he's asking us to change some things. It's fascinating to me that the very person who so eloquently has taught us in this passage about what it means to be mature as Christians, how to lead as Christians, is the very person who denied Jesus 3 times when the going got tough. Peter, which means the rock, was formerly Simon, which means the vacillator. Simon, who was all talk, became Peter, the man instructing elders. The man who denied Jesus 3 times to save his own behind, eventually died a martyr himself because of his devotion to Jesus. And this should encourage us all. There's hope for each of us. Jesus will walk with us and lead us each step of the way. Just as Jesus did not abandon Simon in his imperfection, he will not abandon us in ours. And just as Jesus encouraged Simon that he would become the rock, Jesus has good things in store for us. If you're listening to me today and you're involved with this group of people who will love you well, and you don't know Jesus personally, the Bible teaches us that if we confess with our mouths and believe with our hearts that Jesus is Lord, that he will save us. We can't just go to church. We can't just be good people, as Paul describes elders should be. That's part of what Jesus does for us in his reclamation work that he does in our lives, but is not satisfactory to save us. The only way to be saved as imperfect people is through the work of a perfect God. Jesus did that. And so I would encourage you, if that's a decision you haven't made, if you haven't invited Jesus to be Lord of your life, you need to do that. There's a couple of reasons you need to do that. One, you're running out of time. There will come a time when we pass where we no longer are able to make that decision for ourselves. And Jesus giving us free will is expecting us to invite him in. He stands at the door and knocks, and he's waiting for that invitation. The second is, the longer that we wait to humble ourselves, to check our pride and realize that we need to be saved, the longer we wait to do that, the less we avail ourselves to the work that Jesus can do in our lives. And the true inner peace, the true joy that we can experience as he does his work and he makes the changes that only he can make in each and every one of our lives. So I would encourage you to do that. Take Jesus up on his offer. There are none too far from him, and there are none who have tried to work their way too close to him. that can't be saved. He's waiting, and he wants you to invite him in. I can't think of a better Father's Day gift that you could be given as a father than that one of your children would come to salvation in Jesus Christ. And I can't think of a better gift that you as a father could give to your children than to be saved by Jesus Christ. So I hope this is helpful. I hope it gives you a little bit of groundwork to know that as elders, as an elder, here's where we're coming from. Here are some of the things that we seek to be for you. And hopefully this has been helpful. Happy Father's Day, and God bless you all.